Well, well, well. Would you look at the time? It's Halloween, probably, when you're watching this. And if it isn't, what are you doing? Turn off the video. This is the spooky season special. I mean, come on. Go watch whatever I've released after that. Come back in, like, I don't know, however many months it is till it's October again. Is it December right now? Are you watching this 2 months after I put it out? I know you are, you goon. Anyway, Fallout has always had a spooky undertone to it. Monsters under its Vault-Tec branded bed. Skeletons in its nuked out crater where its closet used to be. Now, at first glance, this series is just a science fiction extravaganza. But just like its inspiration, that being the old pulpy sci-fi of yesteryear, it's often spooky for the sake of spooky. Whether that's the haunting remains of what used to be a playground now rusted over as it's been over 200 years since a child has stepped foot in it, or it's but see, those are both purely sci-fi, but Fallout just can't stay away from the supernatural. It's an addiction, really. Fallout wants to tell you a story about the post-apocalypse, but they can't stop eyeing that Lovecraft novel on the table. So for this spooky season, I thought it'd be best to tackle such a topic in the same way Fallout does, erratically and with less information given than I should have. This series and its psychics really go hand in hand all the way since the beginning of the series. From its more technical in-universe categorization of them to people with vague yet evidently real powers. People with psychic abilities and psychic-esque powers have made their first appearance in Fallout 1 and have stood the test of time, still appearing to this day in Fallout 76. So starting from the beginning, we have the Psychers of Fallout 1. These were a group of experiments by the Master, who also had psychic powers. Now these powers were portrayed more like abilities of the mind they had heightened due to everyone's favorite sci-fi goop, the Forced Evolutionary Virus. But these abilities go a little above and beyond your standard, my IQ was raised to 10,000, so now I can read your mind, and veer more off into a JoJo, poke this part of your brain and turn into a vampire. With these psychics having abilities like pyrokinesis, it's hard not to veer off into fantasy trains of thought when a guy can command fire with the power of his mind. The Master apparently also had incredibly potent psychic powers, rendering anyone but the most built different unable to fight him when they were in his psychic zone, although clearly they weren't potent enough in the end. But the psychics don't end there. In fact, they only get more vaguely supernatural as the series goes on. Like in the next game, Fallout 2, where the Chosen One's tribe shaman Hakunin can just communicate with them in dream visions outright. While outside of having his face in your dreams, it's not that scary, because, you know, he's actually trying to help you, but it is outright magical. This guy didn't get any FEV injections in the brain as far as I know. He's just magical for some reason. I don't know, he does a lot of drugs. What do you want? He's just a wizard, man, and you have to accept that at face value. Moving on to Fallout 3, we have the brain in the jar from Point Lookout, or, you know, more so the brain in the tube from Point Lookout. But his powers lean like almost 120% into the scientific angle rather than the supernatural, but the DLC he appears in is going to be important later to some Lovecraftian context. But until then, we have Forecaster and Mama Murphy. Forecaster here is really just an excuse to call back to the Psychers from Fallout 1, as he's wearing the same thing around his head as they did, a tool that dampens the psychic powers of the user because, you know, I guess if they think too hard, they'll get like a brain hemorrhage or something. But make no mistake, he still is really a psychic. He's not just a reference. The only issue is his psychic readings kind of suck. I mean, they are definitely real, just not very interesting. Like in one of them, he tells you to go talk to Veronica, who is like 5 feet away from you, and you should go be friends with her, which might have been helpful on your first playthrough in 2010. Now see, Mama Murphy, on the other hand, needs to do hard drugs to get her psychic visions, which you could interpret as her just being high off of her ass and telling you what she's imagining. But if that were the case, that just means she is incredibly, almost supernaturally lucky, because during those trips, she tells you stuff that she would have absolutely no way of actually knowing. Give Mama Murphy enough crack and she'll tell you the password for a quest, or she'll tell you where Kellogg's house keys are, and she can even give the player a coarser deactivation code. Now maybe you could be like, oh, what if she's actually a synth from the Institute and she's doing like 5D chess with you, and that's how she knew. No, she's just magic, alright? Anyway though, Mama Murphy and Hakunin both seem to lack the medical issues that the FEV psychers have. What with the whole needing the mental dampener so their heads don't explode or whatever. I mean, I say this assuming that Forecaster is sort of an FEV psycher in some way. I mean, the little dude is wearing the mental dampener, so I think it's sort of safe to assume. If it's not, I don't care. Don't tell me otherwise. I'll cry. So anyway, it seems like there might be a bit of a pattern here. here. That psychics whose powers come from more mystical origins / drugs might be a bit better off than the FEV brain inject kind. But while Mama Murphy, this grown-ass adult, is 1,000 times better than the literal child forecaster at the same game, her weird need for drugs is likely to kill her. Give her enough ketamine and she will just die. So like, point for forecaster, I guess, good on him. In a Tumblr post, Joshua Sawyer stated that Fallout can have a little bit of supernatural as a treat. It should remain unexplained and feel alien. And I definitely agree, whether it's super evolved brains or just people with seemingly magical powers, I think both can fit in the series just fine as long as they don't really try to explain why or how this works. And that goes for all the supernatural stuff we'll discuss in a moment. Fallout, you can have a little bit of dark gods as a treat, but not a whole meal. Now, there is one more psychic in the series that's worth mentioning, but he is, bar none, the most powerful and evidently supernatural out of all of them. But I feel that he should be saved for a later segment, because there's a lot more to him than just being psychic. And with that, let's move on to... Oh, did you think I was going to talk about the Lovecraft stuff next? Nah, we talking about ghosts now. And when I say ghosts, I mean anything that's specter-ish, if you get what I'm implying. Because there are a few that probably could have sorta their own separate section, but they'd be pretty lonely in that section. So I'm lumping them all here with the same spooks and creeps. Now, ghosts in Fallout are interesting because unlike the psychics, the ghosts tend to range in how apparent they are. Sometimes they are very much in your face, and other times it's like, was that real or not? But starting with one that is very much in your face, we have Fallout 2. And in Fallout 2, you come face to face with a ghost in the den. Like, yeah, no, that's just a ghost. That's a specter, an ectoplasmic apparition. You aren't the only one who's seen this gassed, though. The ghost here is a specter of a woman named Anna Winslow. Or Anna Winslow, I don't care. Now, the reason why this woman is haunting some dingy room in the den is that her locket was stolen by a walking 1967 after-school drug PSA. And he saw the ghost too, while he was high off jet, which would make him not the most credible witness, but unless you want to play your chosen one as a equally crack-headed individual as Joey here, I'd say your interactions with the ghost corroborate Joey's panicked ramblings. But on the spookier, more mysterious side of things, there's Fallout 4's Lucy Grantchester from the Nuka World DLC. See, Nuka World is just surrounded by a bunch of random weird places. Like, it's an odd layout on Bethesda's part. From a gas station with hobologists who made it all the way over from San Francisco to a Dark Souls reference, and more. But most importantly, the Grantchester Mystery Mansion. This place was home to the Grantchester family, the father Hannibal and the mother Morticia. Ha! I get it. And their daughter named Lucy. Unfortunately for the family, apparently, Lucy became possessed. And well, of course, what else do possessed people do but kill their entire family? This resulted in poor Lucy being locked up in an insane asylum till her 18th birthday. Until she escaped, ran home, and, she did something. I'm not gonna say, but I'm gonna put it up on the screen. I don't know. I don't want to get in trouble for saying that. On YouTube. Anywho, like in real life, people saw a grisly crime tragedy and said, how can I make money out of this? And they decided to turn the mansion into a haunted house attraction for profit. Although I don't know how much money they made because, that thing happened. What was it again? Oh right, the apocalypse happened. Yeah, I don't think they might have made too much profit. Luckily, the building was left intact enough for the sole survivor to show up and kill some gunners who were held up in there. And while you're cleaning out all the gunners from the Grantchester mansion, you'll notice a little girl, very out of place being here, who disappears around corners and can seemingly run through dead ends. She is always out of reach. This is the ghost of Lucy Grantchester, probably. And just for added effect, she giggles at you while she runs away in case you weren't spooked enough by the creepy little ghost girl. The leader of the gunners here, Zachariah, actually wrote down that he too was hearing the weird, creepy little giggles from around the house. But of course, he chalked it up to a malfunctioning Protectron because that could definitely feasibly make giggling sounds. Finally, if you're still a naysayer in our little ghost story here, your final interaction with Lucy has her running away from you yet again the moment you enter the room. But this time, she runs right through a door, and when you open it, it leads to nowhere. Now, I'm going to let my good friend here take over because, well, last time when I said this exact line, I said it was because it was very late and I had a lot to record. But now, it is in fact the afternoon, a few days later, because guess what? I've had to re-record like 90% of this video. So, I'm still going to hand it off to my friend. You'll like him. He's cute. It'll be fine.
Speaking of ghosts, as Snowy was saying, in Fallout New Vegas there's the ghost of She. Now, this is debatably a hallucination or not, but anyway. In Fallout New Vegas' Honest Hearts DLC, you come face to face with this massive, flaming Yaogwai after downing a concoction of a few plants you picked yourself, because you're such a good little gardener, aren't you? Yes, you are. Yes. Now, one could argue this whole thing was just a hallucination caused by the tea White Bird makes for you out of the plants. But this event happens often, because as the quest says, this is a rite of passage. So everyone seems to see the same flaming giant bear. So while the tribe's story about the ghost of She could just be leaving a deep cultural impression on the people of the tribe to the point where they all see the ghost of She, I have my doubts that it leaves such a lasting impression on you. You are just some guy who delivers mail and gets stuck in a national park. So, case closed. A girl slept inside of a Yaogwai cave and gets eaten and becomes a magical ghost bear. There is no other feasible argument you can make against this, so hush.
Well, wasn't that just swell, folks? But now let's look at a magic ghost thing I wish was just an illusion. Folks at home, do you remember the Children of the Atom? That little small cult in the middle of Megaton in Fallout 3 just sort of stood there while yelling in irradiated water, but overall they were pretty nice to the people around them. Well, for some reason in Fallout 4, they got a massive big upgrade into a massive fanatical cult that spread all the way up the East Coast and are now very armed and very dangerous. But they aren't that big of a deal, no worse than the raiders who are around them, who are also very armed and very dangerous, though for some reason Fallout Shelter Online thought that they were worth some special treatment here. I don't know if I follow the thought process in design, but you know, sure, why not? Anyway, they are kind of a big deal on the island of Far Harbor, where they are one of the 3 factions trying to survive on this quaint little slice of hell. Now, the Far Harbor DLC is overall very spooky, and maybe that's just because it's Point Lookout 2 for some reason, so I could go on and on and on about how spooky and scary this DLC is, but we're here to talk about cultists, not shellfish. See, the island of Far Harbor is covered in this weird, gross, thick, mysterious radiation fog, and within that fog dwells giant enemy crabs, but more importantly, a supernatural being known as the Mother of the Fog. Now, this ghostly woman apparently led this sect of the Children of the Atom to their new base on the island after being banished from the island's only town for being a weird cult, which is fine and dandy. I mean, doesn't mean this is anything more than a legend, right? Wrong, because in the quest Visions in the Fog, your character is tasked with drinking stagnant, dirty pond water that's also been irradiated to the point where it's green, with a side of toxic waste for good measure. This, of course, leads you to see visions of the Mother of the Fog, which would be fine because in Point Lookout, you do a suspiciously similar quest, and that was all just hallucinations. Hell, the weird shadow versions of in-game enemies you see during this quest could also just be hallucinations. But I find it a little hard to believe that the Mother here is just some dingy water-induced hallucination when she leads you through the fog to a building that has a wooden idol of her inside of it. A place you had no idea existed because it was just like a shack. Like, who cares about it? But speaking of divine figures and cultists, we have to move on to the big part. Bethesda Fallout games have a weird tendency to flirt with the supernatural a lot more than other entries in the series. Sure, I've mentioned plenty of things so far that weren't in Bethesda Fallout titles, but Bethesda just loves their supernatural a bit more than other studios. This love has manifested into a reoccurring side story that is steeped in Lovecraft bullshit. But before I go on and talk about that, let's talk about the Cabot family, and specifically Lorenzo Cabot. See, Lorenzo Cabot was that super powerful, supernatural psychic I mentioned, and this is when you get to meet him. So you meet the Cabots in Fallout 4, and they are a little odd to say the least. Their house is in perfect condition, and they themselves seem to be out of place. Their clothes are clean and intact. But no, they didn't just pop out of a vault either, which would explain that, but it's not what happened. See, a long time ago, the father in the family, Lorenzo, discovered an ancient lost city, older than any human, and had structures deep within the earth. And in there, he found a weird-looking crown thing that would give him supernatural powers and immortality. Unfortunately, Lorenzo went a little crazy and went on a bit of a crime spree / murder spree. So his family had him locked up and contained in the basement of an insane asylum. And in there, they found out that they could extract some weird goo from Lorenzo and inject it into themselves, and they too would gain immortality. And this all happened back in the 1800s. Yes, the Cabots and Lorenzo Cabot are over 400 years old. And this isn't just a bunch of crazy people. people. No, we see Lorenzo's powers on full display in this because you can fight him. But also, I mean, like, man, look at his Fallout Shelter Online card. I don't even know what's going on here, but it's magic. Anyway, this whole backstory is clearly a nod to the Lovecraft story, The Nameless City, what with the ancient city older than humans lost in the Middle East, and there's creepy underground structures and all that. All very Nameless City. Anyway, you can choose how you want to deal with these goons. And one ending, you too can become immortal by helping Lorenzo, so that's something with implications that mean something. But Bethesda didn't just want to make an homage to Lovecraft stories. No, they wanted to write their own. And that's the reoccurring storyline I was talking about. The Dunwich storyline, which, yes, is still a reference to a Lovecraft story, but only in name. So this story involves two entwined families, the Dunwich family and the Blackhall family, both of which were super powerful pre-war families with massive amounts of wealth and occult knowledge and connections. And basically, we don't care about the Blackhalls other than a long time ago, one of them was named Constance Blackhall, and her brother was also Richard Dunwich, and she used her wealth and occult connections to get her hands on an evil magic book, the Krivbekni. And we know this because one of her creepy descendants is still alive in the post-war world, living in his family's decrepit mansion on Point Lookout. And see, this creepy descendant has a creepy problem. Some swamp folks stole the Krivbekni to worship it in their own weird, inbred way, and he wants you to get it back. Now sure, you could give the scary magic book to this suspicious magic man, or instead you could take it far, far away from Point Lookout, down to the corner of the base game map to the Dunwich Building. The Dunwich Building is probably the most famous and well-known part of this whole story, especially because it appears in every single video and list that's about, like, ooh, creepy locations in games that aren't actually scary. Anyway, this place acted as an office for the Dunwich Borers LLC company, and underneath it, you can find a big obelisk to the strange, mysterious god Ugh-Qualtoth. Along with the obelisk and the creepy vibes, you can find a bunch of audio logs of a man who went looking for his father who wound up here. Both ended up turning into ghouls, and this guy just straight up name drops the guy who wrote the Necronomicon, which is debatably too on the nose, but I mean, ignore that part if you want. Anyway, unless you really want to roleplay your lone wanderer as basically being Maxwell from Don't Starve, you probably want to bring the Krivbekni down here. Once you get down to the creepy shrine, just press the book against the obelisk will then eat the book, and all the ghouls will burst into flames magically. This isn't the last or only other Dunwich location. Over in Fallout 4 in Boston, you can find some of the boring that the Dunwich Borers LLC were doing. And of course, they just couldn't help themselves from putting an evil temple down in there too. I mean, where else would you put an evil temple? Honestly, it's perfect. It's a giant hole in the ground. Exploring down here, you can just straight up see ghostly visions through time of all the creepy ass past rituals that were held down here. You can get possibly an evil magic weapon from an underwater shrine, and down there you can also find a creepy face buried facing upwards deep within the earth. And I don't like that part. That part, when I found it for the first time, I was like, oh shit, I don't like this. And that is just about everything supernaturally noteworthy in Fallout. I mean, what else do you want me to talk about, huh? How maybe the giant face in the water ties to the sacred head of the Vault Dweller, or whatever the Bridge Keeper is and his possible Monty Python magic, or whatever mystical implications there are in the Cafe of Broken Dreams. Oh yeah, right. There's in Fallout 76, there's also the Smiling Man. Yeah, he's based off a real-life urban legend. He's weird and turns into smoke if you attack him. Although, in the real-life legend, he's, like, insinuated to be an alien of sorts, which isn't supernatural, but I mean, turning into, like, smoke is, right? Anyway, this video is over. Happy Halloween. Go to my art social medias to look at art-related art. Check your candy before you eat it. Goodbye.